The Great Deception. It started like any other day. Earth was at peace, its people living in their everyday routines, working, studying, and dreaming. But then, everything changed in a single moment. Across the world, in every major city, the same message flashed on every screen. It was the Galactic Council, an alliance of powerful alien species that had been in contact with Earth for years. Their message echoed through every communication channel, from the simplest home television to the most advanced military systems. Their leader, a towering alien known as High Chancellor Vreel, spoke in a voice that carried authority and terror. People of Earth, your deception has come to an end. You are hereby charged with violating the sacred laws of the galaxy. You will answer for your crimes. The Council declares war upon your planet. Surrender is your only option. Any resistance will be met with complete annihilation. The words were clear, but their meaning was beyond comprehension. Humanity had done nothing wrong. They had always obeyed the Council's rules, followed their guidance, and respected the treaties they had signed. So why now? Why accuse them of crimes they hadn't committed? The world fell silent. Every ear was tuned to the announcement, and every mind was filled with confusion and fear. Across the globe, leaders scrambled to find answers, but none came. In every corner of the earth, people whispered the same question. Why? In Washington, D.C., President Emily Carter stood before a crowd of military leaders and advisors. Her face was pale, her mind racing with uncertainty. The message from the Galactic Council had just been received, and the weight of it pressed on her like a heavy stone. The implications were staggering. The Council was not just any alien alliance. It was the most powerful group in the galaxy, with fleets capable of wiping out entire planets in seconds. Madam President, General Mark Jensen spoke, his voice calm but filled with urgency. We need to prepare for the worst. The Council's fleet is already on its way. We don't have much time. Emily nodded, her mind already working through the possible scenarios. She turned to her intelligence officers, hoping for any shred of information that could explain this madness. Have we done anything to provoke them? Any missteps? Any secret actions they could have misinterpreted? The officers exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, Colonel Jenna Lark, shook her head. We've checked. There's nothing, ma'am. No covert operations, no violations of their laws. We've been following the rules to the letter. But this accusation, it doesn't make sense, Emily muttered, pacing the room. This war, it's based on a lie. Meanwhile, across the world, panic began to spread. In the streets of New York, people gathered around televisions and holographic displays. The Galactic Council's message was on repeat, and it didn't take long for fear to seep into the hearts of humanity. The idea of a war with an alien force that could crush them in an instant was terrifying. In London, Prime Minister Richard Bennett addressed his people in an emergency broadcast. We are under attack by the Galactic Council. We have no choice but to defend our planet. We will stand united in this crisis, no matter the odds. The message was clear. Humanity was on its own. But the real question was why? What had they done to deserve this? Earth had been a peaceful planet, a neutral member of the Council, and they had always abided by the rules. Yet now, they were being treated as if they were the enemy. Back in the United States, President Carter addressed the nation, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her heart. This is not our fault. We have done nothing wrong. But make no mistake, we will not surrender. We will not be intimidated by lies. This planet belongs to humanity, and we will defend it with every resource we have. The words were meant to reassure, but in the quiet corners of the world, doubts lingered. How could they fight a war they didn't understand? How could they stand up against an enemy that seemed to be both everywhere and nowhere at the same time? The world's governments quickly turned to their military forces, scrambling to make preparations. However, they faced a major obstacle. They had no idea what they were fighting against. The Galactic Council was a shadowy organization, and very few knew the full extent of their capabilities. Some said the Council had mastered advanced technologies that made Earth's weapons look primitive. Others whispered that the Council had hidden fleets, waiting just beyond the reach of human sensors. Despite the uncertainty, Earth's military forces began mobilizing. The world's largest cities prepared for the worst, while scientists and engineers worked feverishly to improve Earth's defense systems. Satellites were launched, and military personnel were placed on high alert. However, despite all their preparation, one undeniable fact remained: humanity was vastly outgunned. Then, as the hours passed, a chilling discovery was made. The Earth's best and brightest scientists, working tirelessly in secret government facilities, uncovered something that should have been impossible. The Council's accusation was based on a complete fabrication. They had no evidence to back up their claim. It was all a lie. The more they dug, the more they realized the full extent of the deception. The Galactic Council had orchestrated a massive scheme to provoke war with Earth. But why? Why target humanity, a species that had so much potential? And what were they hiding? These questions haunted the minds of the world's leaders as they realized that the war they were facing had been planned long before the announcement had been made. They were pawns in a game they didn't even understand. But one thing became clear: humanity was not going to be the victims in this war. The lie would be exposed, but not before they showed the Council that humanity was far stronger than they had ever imagined. They had been underestimated, and now they were going to prove it. Earth would not surrender. They would fight, and they would not stop until they had uncovered the truth and taken their revenge. The first shots of the war would be fired not in defense, but in defiance. The battle for Earth had just begun, and humanity was ready to take the fight to the stars. The shock of the Galactic Council's sudden declaration of war was still fresh. Around the world, cities were on high alert, and governments scrambled to unite their forces. The weight of uncertainty hung heavily over every decision made, but there was one thing that had begun to stir in the hearts of humankind: defiance. In every corner of the globe, humanity began to change. The fear and confusion that had gripped the masses slowly transformed into determination. Earth was not going to go down without a fight. As more information about the Council's fabricated accusations was uncovered, people began to understand that this wasn't just a war for survival. It was a fight for their freedom, their future, and their right to exist. Across the United States, President Emily Carter met with military leaders, scientists, and the brightest minds in human defense. They were well aware of the odds stacked against them, but they also knew that the Galactic Council had underestimated them. They had underestimated humanity's spirit. It was time to show the galaxy just how wrong they were. "General Jensen, what are our options?" President Carter asked, standing before a massive digital map of Earth's defense grid. "We're working on it, Mom," General Mark Jensen replied. "Our technology is not as advanced as the Council's, but we've got Ingenuity on our side. Our engineers are working on upgrading our weapons systems, and our scientists are developing new technologies that could potentially level the playing field." Emily nodded, looking at the map. She could see the lines of defense, the zones of strategic importance, but it wasn't enough. The Galactic Council was already mobilizing its fleets, and Earth's best forces were still in the process of being assembled. Time was running out, but she knew that no matter how small their chances, Earth was not going to simply roll over. "We need a new strategy," she said, her voice sharp with resolve. "We need to hit them where they least expect it. I want to use our tech, our willpower, and above all else, our courage. We'll find a way to use everything we have." Meanwhile, across the globe, Earth's military forces were preparing for battle. In Russia, the massive Siberian bases were stocked with weapons and equipment. In China, the Great Wall of Defense was being reinforced with the latest laser-based technologies. Even the jungles of Africa were being turned into hidden military hubs, where guerrilla forces trained and prepared for sabotage. While the world's military machine churned into motion, something even more extraordinary was happening. Ordinary people, farmers, teachers, doctors, began organizing. They weren't soldiers, but they were human, and they had a fierce will to protect their planet. Communities rallied around the idea that they could stand together against this alien force. A movement began to spread across the internet. We fight for Earth. At the same time, underground groups of hackers infiltrated the Galactic Council's communication systems. What they discovered was chilling. The Galactic Council had been watching Earth for centuries, studying its people, learning from their mistakes, and monitoring their progress. The Council had anticipated that humanity would eventually rise, but they hadn't expected it to happen so soon. What they didn't know was that humans had learned from every failure. Their greatest strength was not their technology, but their resilience, their ability to adapt. As the days passed, President Carter and her advisors learned more about the Council's inner workings. The fabrications of the Council's accusations were not just a random act. They had planned this war as a means to control Earth, to suppress the rise of humanity's potential. The Council had been watching them for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. They feared humanity's creativity, its innovation, its ability to overcome impossible odds. But the truth was clear. Earth was not weak. They were far stronger than the Council had ever anticipated. In the shadows of the war room, a young scientist named Dr. Lena Hayes was working tirelessly on a secret project. She had been studying the Council's advanced technology, searching for any weakness. After days of research and countless experiments, she finally discovered something that could change the course of the war. The Council's fleet, despite its overwhelming power, relied on a central command system that was vulnerable to a specific type of electronic disruption. Lena immediately contacted the president. "We found it. There's a way to disrupt their communication systems, cripple their fleet. But it's risky. We'll need to get in close." President Carter listened intently. "How close?" "Close enough to the heart of their fleet, in their command center," Lena replied. "But it could buy us the time we need to turn the tide." Carter paused, her eyes narrowing with determination. "We'll do whatever it takes. Prepare the teams. We'll make it happen." As the plan took shape, the world's leaders began to rally their people. Earth's greatest minds, soldiers, and civilians came together with one common purpose: to defend their planet and show the Galactic Council that they had made a grave mistake. Humanity wasn't a weak species to be conquered. They were a force to be reckoned with. In the streets, people gathered in solidarity, standing tall with banners and signs that read, "We fight for Earth, and no surrender." The message was clear. Earth was ready to rise. And so, with Earth's most brilliant minds working in secret and its military forces mobilizing for battle, humanity began to make its first stand. The fight for survival had turned into a fight for revenge. The time to show the Galactic Council just how wrong they were had come. Humanity was no longer underestimating itself. It was no longer waiting for permission to act. Now, they would make their own fate. The world was on the brink of war, but instead of fear, there was a fire burning deep inside every human heart, and this fire would light the way forward. The battle for Earth had begun, and humanity would fight until the very end. The calm before the storm was always the most unsettling. The world knew the Galactic Council's ships were out there, hidden in the vastness of space, poised to strike. Yet, despite the terror of their looming presence, something deep inside the hearts of humanity had begun to stir. It wasn't fear anymore. It was anger, resolve, and a burning need for justice. On Earth, there was no room for hesitation. Every nation had thrown aside old rivalries and united in a way that had never been seen before. The Earth Defense Coalition, a group of military and civilian leaders, had been formed. Together, they worked tirelessly, night and day, preparing for the conflict they knew was coming. Their mission was clear. They would protect their world, no matter the cost. The soldiers and scientists who had been working on the new technologies quickly realized they had created something powerful. Lena Hayes, the young scientist who had discovered the weakness in the Galactic Council's communication system, had become a key figure in the effort to level the playing field. Her work was groundbreaking. She had developed a way to disrupt the enemy's fleet by hacking into their central command, effectively crippling their coordination. But getting close enough to launch this attack would be the biggest risk humanity had ever taken. Despite the dangers, the Earth Defense Coalition knew it had no choice. A small group of elite soldiers, along with a team of hackers and scientists, was selected for a mission that seemed impossible. They would board a newly designed stealth ship, one that could get close to the heart of the enemy fleet undetected, and carry out the attack that would change everything. As the team prepared for their dangerous journey, President Emily Carter stood before them, her face resolute but full of empathy. "You are Earth's last hope. This mission will define us. Your courage will light the way for future generations. If we are to win this war, it starts with you." Among the chosen soldiers was Captain Daniel Harris, a battle-hardened officer with years of experience in the field. He was known for his calm under pressure, his leadership, and his unwavering dedication to his people. But as he gazed out at the assembly of soldiers in front of him, he couldn't shake the feeling that the task ahead of them might be more than even they could handle. Still, there was no turning back now. "We've been given an impossible mission," Captain Harris said, his voice firm but laced with determination. "But we're humans. We thrive on the impossible. We'll show the galaxy that we don't back down. Ever." Across the globe, similar scenes were unfolding. People everywhere were coming together, setting aside their differences to prepare for the fight of their lives. From the smallest villages to the largest cities, humans were organizing. They were training, they were arming themselves, and they were learning the harsh truth that they would have to face. Their survival depended on every one of them. In the heart of Europe, the European Union had declared a state of emergency, with military forces stationed at every major port and airfield. The skies were filled with drones and fighter jets, all on high alert. Across Asia, underground resistance movements had grown into full-fledged military units, ready to strike if the need arose. In Africa, governments had put aside their differences, sharing resources and knowledge to build the most formidable defense systems the continent had ever seen. Meanwhile, the Council's forces watched in silence. They had anticipated humanity's resistance, but they still believed that their superior technology and vast fleets would crush the Earth's defenses. What they didn't account for was the sheer willpower of humankind, their ability to fight even when the odds were impossible. Humanity had always been underestimated, but now they were showing the galaxy just how wrong the Council was. On the Moon, the first human-built space station was being completed. It was a symbol of Earth's resilience, a reminder that humanity was capable of extraordinary things, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. Scientists, engineers, and workers from every corner of the Earth had come together to make it possible. They knew the stakes were high, and this station would serve as a launch point for Earth's offensive, a place from which they would strike the Council where it hurt the most. In the midst of the growing tension, Lena Hayes and her team were finalizing their plan to infiltrate the Council's communication system. Using a newly developed form of quantum encryption, they were going to bypass the Council's advanced defenses and disrupt their command network. It was a gamble. If they succeeded, it would buy humanity the time they desperately needed. If they failed, the Council's forces would overwhelm them with even greater speed. "We don't have much time," Lena said as she worked feverishly at her console, eyes bloodshot from days of sleepless nights. "We've cracked their encryption, but we need to launch this attack now before they upgrade their defenses. One mistake, and it's over." Captain Harris, now suited in his combat armor, stood by her side. His eyes were determined, though he could feel the weight of the mission on his shoulders. "We'll make it happen. We'll hit them where it hurts. And when we do, we'll show them exactly who they're messing with." As the mission team prepared to launch, a sense of unity spread across Earth. From the military leaders to the civilians, everyone felt the call to action. There was no more time to wait. The battle for Earth was about to begin. The stage was set. Humanity had been underestimated, pushed to the edge, and left to fall. But now, they were no longer waiting for permission. They were making their own fate. As the mission team boarded their stealth ship and began their journey into the heart of enemy territory, one thing was clear. Humanity had found its strength, and they would not go down without a fight. The galaxy had made a grave mistake in underestimating humanity. Now it was time for Earth to rise and show them just how wrong they were. The storm was coming, and this time, humanity would be ready. The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly before them, yet inside the hull of the stealth ship, a charged silence hung in the air. The mission was underway, and there was no turning back now. Captain Daniel Harris stood at the front of the command deck, his fingers gripping the edge of the control panel, eyes fixed on the holographic map in front of him. Lena Hayes, the brilliant scientist who had cracked the Galactic Council's encryption, sat beside him, scanning the data streams that were flashing across her screens. The ship, cloaked in a near-invisible field of advanced technology, coasted silently through the darkness. It was the most sophisticated piece of human-made technology ever conceived, designed to slip past the best detection systems the Council had to offer. Every inch of it was crafted for one singular purpose: to infiltrate the Council's stronghold and deal a devastating blow. Captain Harris knew that time was slipping away. Every second spent in enemy territory made them more vulnerable to detection. His team had been trained for months to face the impossible, but nothing could have prepared them for the sheer enormity of what they were up against. "How much longer until we reach the target?" Harris asked, his voice steady but tense. Lena didn't look up from her console. "We're still several minutes away. The Council's primary fleet is stationed just beyond the asteroid field, but we should be able to bypass them if we maintain our current course." Harris nodded. He trusted Lena's calculations. He had to. But he also knew that the closer they got to the Council's stronghold, the greater the risk. A single mistake would end them all. The ship's engines hummed low, almost inaudible, as they passed through the asteroid field. The space around them was littered with massive chunks of rock, some large enough to crush the ship if they collided. Yet the crew moved with a focused calm, maneuvering their ship between the giant space rocks with precision. Suddenly, an alert flashed on Lena's screen. A ripple of tension shot through the room as her fingers flew across the keys. She didn't need to say anything. The look on her face told them all they needed to know. "We've been detected," Lena said, her voice sharp. "Their long-range sensors have picked up something. They're locking onto us." Harris' heart skipped a beat. They had known this moment was coming. Every stealth system, every countermeasure, every tactic was designed for this exact scenario, the moment when they were no longer undetected. "Bring the shields up," Harris ordered, his voice calm but urgent. The ship's shields flickered to life, wrapping the vessel in an energy field designed to absorb incoming fire. But Harris knew it wasn't enough. The Council's ships were massive and heavily armed. One direct hit could tear them apart. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Harris barked. "We're going to have to outrun them." The crew scrambled into action, their training kicking in as they immediately began to maneuver the ship into tight, twisting patterns. The stealth ship surged forward, dipping and diving between the asteroids, trying to lose the Council's pursuers in the debris. Lena's fingers flew over the console, working to keep their cloaking system engaged while simultaneously scrambling the enemy's targeting systems. It was a delicate balancing act. One slip-up, and they would be sitting ducks. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours as the sound of the ship's engines roaring in the vastness of space was drowned out by the pulse of adrenaline in their veins. "We're losing them," Lena said with a breath of relief, but her face remained tense. "For now." Harris nodded. "Don't relax yet. We've still got a long way to go." The stealth ship, now hidden deep within the asteroid field, pushed forward at full speed. The distant hum of the engines was the only sound that filled the cabin. The crew was silent, each of them focused on their tasks, knowing that any wrong move could mean the end of their mission and the end of Earth's hope for survival. But just as they thought they had shaken off their pursuers, a warning sounded from the ship's sensors. This time, the message was more urgent. It was clear one of the larger council ships had broken off from the formation and was heading straight toward them. "We're not out of the woods yet," Lena said, her voice tight with tension. Harris clenched his fists. He had expected this. The council would not let them slip away so easily. This was the moment they had been dreading, the confrontation. "Ready weapons," Harris ordered. "If they want to fight, we'll give them one." The ship's weapon systems hummed to life, their pulse lasers glowing a dangerous red. But Harris knew this wasn't just about firepower. This was about survival. If they could take down even a few of the Council's ships, it would give them the opening they needed to complete their mission and get back to Earth. "On my mark," Harris said, his voice steady. "We hit them hard and fast. We don't have the luxury of a prolonged fight." The ship turned sharply, its weapons aimed directly at the approaching enemy ship. It was a formidable target, one of the Council's dreadnoughts, heavily armed and armored, capable of tearing apart any opposition. But Harris wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. They were human, and they had one thing the Council did not: unrelenting determination. 3, 2, 1. "Now," Harris shouted. The stealth ship fired its first volley of energy blasts, striking the Council ship's shield. The impact sent a shockwave through the ship's frame, rattling the crew. The enemy ship fired back, its lasers slicing through the void of space. But the humans were faster, more agile. Harris barked out orders, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Engage evasive maneuvers. Fire again." Another blast from the ship's weapon systems slammed into the Council ship's hull. The enemy vessel rocked violently, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though they might have a chance. But just as quickly as the hope had surged, disaster struck. The Council ship's shields began to recharge faster than they anticipated, and it fired back with overwhelming force. The stealth ship's hull shuddered under the assault, alarms blaring as the shields began to flicker. "We're not going to last long like this," Lena shouted, her hands flying over the console. "Hold on," Harris commanded, grit in his voice. "We can't give up now." As the battle raged on, the fate of humanity hung in the balance. This was just the beginning, the opening move in a fight that would determine the future of the human race. The storm was upon them, and they were determined to face it head-on. And somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, the Galactic Council began to realize something they had never expected. The humans they had thought so weak were about to show them a fight unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The once quiet hum of the stealth ship's engines was now drowned out by the chaos unfolding. Captain Harris could hear the rapid beeping of the alarms, signaling that the hull was taking hits. The ship's shields were flickering dangerously, and the energy levels were dangerously low. They had been fighting for what seemed like an eternity, but the enemy ship, though wounded, refused to back down. Harris gritted his teeth, his hand gripping the armrest of his chair. His thoughts raced as he scanned the situation. The Council ship had its shields back up, stronger than ever. They had underestimated how quickly the enemy could recover. "How much longer until we can recharge the shields?" Harris asked, his voice tight, trying to sound calm. Lena, her face pale from the stress, quickly assessed the data on her screen. "At least 15 minutes, Captain. We won't last that long. We need to do something now." Harris's mind raced. They were running out of time, and their options were dwindling. The enemy ship was closing in fast, and they were outgunned and outmatched. A quick glance around the command deck told him that his crew was at their limit. They had given everything, and yet the battle was far from over. "Fire the remaining pulse lasers at their weapon systems," Harris ordered. "Target their guns. We need to stop them from firing back." Lena quickly adjusted the targeting systems, and the ship fired a series of powerful energy blasts. The shots struck the enemy ship's weapons arrays, causing a massive explosion on the hull. The enemy ship lurched as its primary weapon systems began to fail. For a split second, Harris allowed himself a small sigh of relief. They had struck a blow, but there was no time to celebrate. The enemy was regrouping, and their fleet was already on its way. "Captain," Lena shouted, her eyes wide with panic. "Another wave of Council ships is approaching. We can't hold them off for much longer." Harris didn't hesitate. He knew they were running out of options, and this was their last chance. He slammed his fist onto the control panel, sending a shockwave through the ship's systems. "Prepare for a full assault. We can't outrun them anymore. This is it." As the stealth ship continued to jolt under the weight of the barrage, Captain Harris took a deep breath. He wasn't ready to die. Not like this, not after everything they had been through. There was still hope. They had come too far to fail now. He turned to Lena. "Can you get us to the Council's command center? If we can make it there, we might stand a chance." Lena's fingers flew over her console as she tapped into the Council's encrypted systems. She had already cracked their codes once, and now it was a matter of using their technology against them. "I can try," she said, her voice tinged with desperation. "But it's going to be close." The stealth ship lurched again as the enemy fired another round of energy blasts. Sparks flew from the control panels, and the ship shook violently. The crew was being pushed to their limits. "We don't have much time," Harris said, his voice low but firm. "Prepare for emergency maneuvers. Keep the ship intact. We need to get to the heart of their operation." Lena nodded, determination lighting up her eyes. "We're almost there, Captain. Just hold on." The ship veered sharply, twisting and turning through the wreckage of the battlefield, narrowly dodging the incoming enemy fire. Harris's heart pounded in his chest, his pulse quickening with each close call. His crew was giving everything they had, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the comms, and it was one they weren't expecting to hear. "This is Commander Valen of the Galactic Council's Vanguard fleet." The voice boomed, filled with disdain. "You are fools to resist. You are no match for our might." Harris's grip tightened on the armrest. It was a warning, a declaration. The enemy was not just fighting for victory. They were fighting for complete subjugation. They saw humans as insignificant, nothing more than ants to be crushed underfoot. But they were wrong. "Don't listen to them," Harris muttered under his breath. "We're not finished yet." Lena's fingers were still working furiously. Her hands moved across the control panel, and for a moment, everything went quiet. Harris watched as her screen lit up with green signals. "We're in," Lena exclaimed. "I've hacked into their central command. We can control their defenses now." For the first time in what felt like ages, a wave of hope surged through Harris's veins. This was their chance. The Council had underestimated humanity's resourcefulness. They thought they could simply crush them, dismissing them as weak. But now, the tables were turning. "Give me full control of the weapons system," Harris said, his voice stronger now. "We're going to hit them hard." Lena complied, her fingers dancing over the keys. Within moments, the ship's weapons system was fully armed and ready. Harris could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, but there was no time to waste. The enemy was closing in fast, and this was their last shot. "Fire everything we've got," Harris commanded. The stealth ship unleashed its full power. The energy blast streaked through space, hitting the enemy ships with devastating force. The Council's ships, caught off guard by the unexpected assault, began to falter, their shields weakening under the barrage. Harris didn't let up. He kept the pressure on, firing again and again, aiming for the heart of their fleet. The battle was far from over, but now there was hope. The underdogs had struck back, and the Council was beginning to realize just how wrong they had been. As the battle raged on, one thing was clear. Humanity was not going down without a fight. The Council had underestimated them, and now they would pay the price. The tide had turned, And it was only just beginning. The rise of humanity had only just begun. The battle was far from over. Captain Harris stood at the front of the command deck, eyes locked onto the chaos unfolding outside the ship. The dark void of space was filled with the flashing lights of explosions, the echo of laser fire reverberating through the hull. The once untouchable council ships were now struggling, battered by the unexpected onslaught. Harris could feel his heart pounding. This was the moment. The tide had turned, but there was still much to do. Humanity had been underestimated, dismissed as weak and insignificant. But now, they were showing the galaxy exactly what they were capable of. Lena, her face tense and focused, worked rapidly on her console. "Captain, the enemy's shields are failing. We've broken through their outer defenses. They won't last much longer." Harris nodded, his eyes scanning the battlefield. The Council fleet, once organized and confident, was now a disordered mess. Their ships were limping, unable to keep up with the relentless barrage. Humanity's stealth ship, small but deadly, had turned the tide of battle. But this victory wasn't just about firepower. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. "Prepare the final strike," Harris ordered, his voice calm but resolute. "Target their command ship. If we take it down, the rest will follow." Lena quickly adjusted the targeting system, locking in on the massive flagship at the heart of the enemy fleet. The ship was surrounded by smaller vessels, desperately trying to defend it. But Harris knew that if they could destroy the command ship, the rest of the Council fleet would crumble. "Ready when you are, Captain," Lena said, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. "Fire," Harris commanded. The stealth ship unleashed a series of devastating blasts, each one finding its mark on the command ship's weak points. The enemy flagship groaned under the assault, its shields flickering. And then, with a deafening explosion, the ship's core reactor ignited. The shockwave from the blast rippled through the fleet, and several other ships were caught in the blast. The sight of the flagship's destruction sent a shockwave of fear through the Council fleet. They hadn't expected humanity to strike so decisively. And now, their command structure was in ruins. But the victory wasn't complete. The remaining ships, though damaged, were still fighting back. Harris could see their desperation in their maneuvers. They were scrambling, trying to regroup, but they were too late. The damage had been done. Harris clenched his jaw. This was the moment to make the Council understand that humanity would never again be their pawn. This was the moment to show the galaxy that humans would never wait for permission. They would make their own fate. "All remaining weapons, fire everything," Harris ordered. The stealth ship's guns roared to life, unleashing wave after wave of destruction. The remaining Council ships, battered and broken, fought back with what little they had left. But it was futile. One by one, they were torn apart. The once proud fleet was collapsing, its once confident ships reduced to floating debris. As the last of the Council's ships crumbled under the barrage, Harris allowed himself a moment to breathe. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Humanity had proven its strength, but the fight for their future had only just begun. "We did it," Lena whispered, her voice filled with awe and disbelief. "We've won." But Harris didn't share her sense of relief. His gaze remained fixed on the wreckage outside. "No, Lena," he said quietly. "This is just the beginning. The galaxy needs to know we're not finished. The Council may have fallen today, but others will rise. And we need to be ready." The command deck fell silent as the crew absorbed his words. The battle they had just fought wasn't just about survival. It was about sending a message to the entire galaxy. The message that humanity would never be treated as inferior again. The ship was still shaking from the strain of the battle. The lights flickered, and there was a hum of power as the systems began to stabilize. The crew had given everything they had, and now they could finally rest, for a moment. But even as they celebrated their victory, there was no time to waste. The galaxy was watching. "Set course for the nearest Alliance base," Harris ordered, his voice firm and commanding. "We need to regroup. There's a lot more to do." Lena nodded, already working on the navigation system. "Course set, Captain. We'll reach the base in a few hours." Harris turned to face the crew. "This is our moment. Humanity has shown the galaxy that we will not be silenced. We will fight for our future. We will fight for our freedom. And we will never wait for permission again." The crew nodded, understanding the weight of his words. They had come a long way, and though the battle was won, there was still much to do. The galaxy had learned a powerful lesson that day. Humanity would no longer be ignored. They would rise, and they would change everything. As the ship moved towards the Alliance base, Captain Harris allowed himself a small, grim smile. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. The rise of humanity was unstoppable. The next chapter had only just begun. The dust of battle had barely settled, but the echoes of victory still reverberated throughout the ship. The once vibrant chaos of the space battlefield now lay still, with only the flickering lights of debris drifting through the emptiness. Captain Harris stood alone on the command deck, staring out into the vastness of space. His mind raced with thoughts of what had just happened. The final assault had been swift and brutal, but it had sent a message that would forever change the way the galaxy viewed humanity. Humanity had been underestimated. For centuries, they had been the butt of jokes, the small, insignificant species that couldn't possibly stand up to the mighty fleets of the galactic powers. But now, the galaxy knew differently. Now they understood what it meant to provoke humanity. Lena, her face still reflecting the shock of the battle, approached Harris slowly. "Captain, the reports are in. The Council fleet is, well, it's done. The few ships that survived are retreating, and the rest are scattered in pieces." Harris nodded, not taking his eyes off the stars. "We showed them what happens when you push a species to the edge. They thought we were weak. They thought they could just take what they wanted. But we're not their playthings. Not anymore." Lena took a deep breath and stood beside him. "What happens next? What will the galaxy do now?" Harris turned to face her, his eyes cold but filled with determination. "Now we take control of our fate. The Council may have fallen today, but others will rise. There are still empires out there, species who see us as nothing more than a nuisance. They won't forget what happened today. And we can't forget either." "We can't just sit back and wait," Lena replied, her voice steady. "We need to send them a message, a bigger message. We need to show them that humanity will never again be a pawn in their games." Harris clenched his fists. "We're not just survivors anymore, Lena. We're warriors, and we'll fight for the future of every human, every colony, every person who has ever been looked down on by the galaxy." The rest of the crew gathered around, their faces still worn from the battle, but filled with a newfound resolve. Harris's words had ignited something within them. They knew this wasn't just about winning a fight. It was about claiming their place in the galaxy. It was about securing their future, a future where humanity wouldn't just survive but thrive. As the crew exchanged quiet nods, Harris turned to the communication officer. "Send a message to the Alliance. Let them know we're coming. Let them know humanity is no longer asking for permission. We're taking what's ours." The officer hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Aye, Captain. The message will be sent." Harris watched as the officer's fingers flew across the console, transmitting the message across the stars. He knew that the galaxy would hear it. The message would spread like wildfire, igniting fear, awe, and respect. Humanity had not only survived, they had won. They had struck fear into the heart of every empire, every species that had ever dismissed them. Lena placed a hand on Harris's shoulder. "We've made our mark. There's no turning back now." Harris smiled grimly. "There never was a turning back. The galaxy will have to adjust. Humanity is here to stay." The ship's engines hummed softly as it drifted toward the nearest Alliance base. The crew's work was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, They felt hopeful. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They would no longer be the weak, forgotten species in the galaxy. They were the ones to be reckoned with now. As the ship sailed into the distance, Captain Harris stood at the helm, looking out into the infinite expanse of space. The galaxy was big, but humanity was bigger. They had been underestimated for far too long, and now it was their time to rise. "We've changed everything," Harris muttered to himself, a cold fire burning in his eyes. "And it's only just begun." The crew gathered around him, their expressions determined. The journey ahead would be difficult, but with their strength, resilience, and unity, they were ready to face whatever came next. The galaxy had learned a lesson today, and humanity was just getting started.